ask him if, is he ready to roll?
He's ready.
Oh, he's ready? Okay. Call this meeting to order, April 8th, 2024, Planning Commission. First item is the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any questions or? If not,
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
all right, all those in favor? All those opposed? Agenda is approved. Adoption of the minutes, March 11th.
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? All right. Next item is subdivision, Legacy Point, Watford Tract. Applicants Ashley, Kyle Lewis, and Karen Watford, tax map number 581000063. Total acreage 17.48 acres. Total lots 3, single-family lots. Council District 2, Ms. Love.
Evening, Marion Ray, zoning planner for York County. Tonight is part of the Legacy Point project that we have going on Concord Road. This lot was purchased by a separate entity, a third party, and they have been working diligently to rezone and get this property divided so that they sell it off. You can see here on the vicinity map, it's surrounded by other large lot vacant parcels. This parcel itself is about 17 acres. They're requesting 3 lots and it's zoned RUD. Each lot will be more than 5 acres in size. And if you might notice, I did a eclipse on my little thing there. So, very proud of myself. All right, I'm gonna go through the history just a little bit. This lot was lot 4 of tract 1, tract 2. It's a little confusing, it was a lot. So we had 4 tracts come through. Tract 2 was divided into 6 lots. This is one of them. When we divided tract 2 into 6 lots, that was the individual subdivision. Any further division is a major subdivision. So they did come through and get rezoned to RUD. Y'all saw that back in November or December, and they are back now it was signed off in January, and it is now ready to come in for preliminary plat. So 3 lots, each 6+ acres. Go through the findings here. The site will be serviced by private water and septic systems, and all the lots meet or exceed the 1 acre minimum lot size as required by RUD zoning. Single-family residential is an allowed use. The RUD zoning district has a maximum density of 1 dwelling unit per acre, and this part of the development has a density of 0.17 units per acre. So for the TIA, a TIA was not required for this one. It is just 3 lots. On to number 4. The development is accessed from Concord Road, right at the end of the state maintenance, at the beginning of the county maintenance, and Sand Leopard Drive to the west side of the property is county maintained. So the site is bounded by those 2 roads and then other large lot vacant parcels on the other 2 sides. Sidewalks are not required due to the lot width of more than 100 feet. And since they've rezoned to RUD for a major subdivision, they are not required to provide 20% open space or buffers. However, they did have to do a tree save, and they have provided a tree survey. So staff recommends approval of this preliminary plat. Go back to that picture.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Since they have the 68-foot Duke Energy easement through there, I'm assuming that all the homes or whatever would have to be put to the west side so it has access, because I don't know if you can set a driveway across that Duke Energy.
You can do private driveways across Duke Energy.
Okay.
They'll even allow you to pave them if you'd like, which in this case probably won't happen. But as long as they meet zoning setbacks, they should be fine. And
Okay.
then that Duke easement, we have multiple driveways all over the county crossing them.
What's the 25-foot utility line buffer yard? Is it those?
on the outside of the Duke easement.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
That's the entirety of the Duke easement. So in this case, it also has a 25-foot buffer yard. That's usually the case, but I have run across where they don't have the additional 25 feet.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any other questions for Marion?
I just wanted to reconfirm that what was changed in terms of zoning in January also had the condition that it could not be subdivided any further.
Correct. No
That-
further
okay.
division is allowed on this property.
Thank you.
And just this property. The other ones were not
Right.
affected.
If there's no other questions, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve?
Second?
Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Next item is rezoning 24-14, Justin Caskey, applicant, Fort Mill Associates LLC, the owner, requesting to rezone a 1.35 acre parcel from UD to GC. The subject parcel is located at 1646 Highway 160, Fort Mill. The property is referenced as tax map number 655-00-00-037, Council District 1, Mr. Audette.
Good evening, everybody. This request here is to rezone a 1.35 acre parcel from UD to GC. The purpose of that is to be able to expand the allowed uses to more accurately reflect what those are found in a commercial retail center. The UD has a limited number of uses. The main thing not allowed in there are things like personal services. And so being able to go to GC expands that to allow those uses. Property is located off of 160, just to the west of I-77, near the Baxter community. As you can see here, Baxter's to the south, area there in gray is the town of Fort Mill. This is a very heavy, intensive retail commercial corridor all through 160. Zooming into the property here, this is an existing multi-tenant building just along 160. A little sketch here of what's in there right now. This is the current tenant mix that's there. I believe they're having either a turnover for this site or the site below it, requiring the rezoning. Zoning for the area here is for still a small portion here of UD. Across the way is the Baxter Village zoning district. Once again, here the gray area, that light gray area is the town of Fort Mill. Comprehensive plan for the area here is actually within a town center. And as we don't see that very often, but that one is where you would have a blend of residential, retail, and office and civic uses that meet something like Baxter for traditional neighborhood development. Buildings typically human scale, and they're located near intersection of major roads. The town center, I'm going to come back to really briefly. It's actually centered more on the Baxter Village area, but it does extend across 160 as well. We're recommending approval for the request. It aligns with the comprehensive plan, the future land use map. It's similar to the areas for parcel or zone GC in the area. It'll remove one more UD parcel from the list. Any questions of staff?
Just wanted to confirm, so by going from UD to GC, it actually expands the number of uses that could be?
It changes it. So it takes away all of the UD that are more of the industrial and those kinds of uses, but then it adds in a few of the more commercial or personal services uses that are more appropriate for a GC kind of district. So it's a swap sort of thing.
Are there any other questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right, is there discussion? If not, all those in favor of recommending? Anyone opposed? All right, case number 2415, Justin Caskey, applicant, Commerce Center LLC, owner, requesting to rezone a 0.79 acre parcel from UD to GC. The subject parcel is located at 1642 Highway 160 Fort Mill. The property is referenced as tax map number 655-00-00-034. Council District 1, Mr. Audette.
This is to rezone a parcel at .79 acre parcel from UD to GC. This is the exact same things we just heard. This is to be able to expand the uses that reflect those of a commercial retail center. Property is located also on 160 near Baxter Village. It's adjacent to what we just talked about. It's also a small existing retail center. Zooming in here, that parcel is a mixture of uses as well. Also, zoning for the area is mostly BV across the street, and there's some UD and GC also on the other side at the intersections with Sutton. Comp plan for the area here is town center, and like we just discussed what that is, that's sort of met with the Baxter Village. We're also recommending approval for this one here. Any questions for staff?
Actually, I didn't ask last time, but so you're saying there's just going to be a turnover of current tenants? We're not changing?
The building will stay the same, but I think there might be a center that's actually a space vacant. They want to get a new tenant here, and I believe that use cannot happen in UD.
Are there any other questions for Diane? If not, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Second? Is there any discussion? No? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Next item is rezoning 24-16, Ashley and Hugh Ford and Daniel Owens, applicant owners, requesting to rezone a 0.9 acre parcel from RSF 30 to OI. The subject parcel is located at 3425 Hands Mill Highway, York. The property is referenced as tax map number 555-00-00-008. Council District 2, Ms. Love.
The request here is to rezone a 0.89 acre parcel from RSF 30 to OI. It's to redevelop the residential parcel as an office use. It's located along Hands Mill Highway in between the intersections of Charlotte Highway 49 and Daimler Cannonball Run now on the western part of the county. This area here is still relatively rural residential. There is some developments being for residential neighborhoods, a little smaller lots just across Haynesville Highway, but for the most part, this area here is still considered rather relatively rural and large lots. Zooming into the property here, as you can see, that's the existing home. It is vacant, and the applicant would like to convert that house or that home into an office space. Just north of that, I've referenced in my staff report a legal non-conforming property. It's just to the north of that. It's where they have the welding business on this lot here. This property owner also owns this property here, so that's why that pool is being split across the parcel line. They own both properties. Zoning for the area here, the majority of this area here is zoned RSF 30, but there is a little bit of NC to the north and LI to the south. But once again, the majority of it here is RSF 30. The comp plan for the area here is single-family residential. And as we know, that's where you typically have single-family detached homes on large lots for a rural or suburban character. You can have some small-scale office if you have certain criteria, one of them, according to the plan, being located adjacent to or near at an intersection of major roads. So we're recommending denial for this request here. As I just mentioned, it does not align with the comprehensive future land use map or the plan. It is not located at an intersection of a major roadway. It's not adjacent to a parcel that's currently zoned or used in a similar fashion. There is a legal non-conforming parcel next to it. However, that should not be the catalyst or the emphasis to be able to go ahead and change over this development pattern of Haynesville Highway. And the goal here is to protect Haynesville Highway from that sporadic sort of random development pattern. And therefore, if you do redevelop along Haynesville Highway, it should be more of an assemblage of parcels to emphasize on access management and the scale. I just want to kind of bring up this map to kind of show you what we're talking about here. So here's the subject property. This is that legal non-conforming property for the welding. They've been there for years. Up here, these are the properties that are currently zoned NC. That one's vacant, and that's a single-family residential. This is not at an intersection of two major roads. These two properties here, they were rezoned in 2008. That's still, I think, a single-family home, and that's a vehicle repair business. They were already there when the property were rezoned in 2008. And also to remember, back in 2023, this was a request here to rezone to NC, and that was denied by council. So we've already had some rezonings in the area here, and I just wanted to show here to kind of emphasize why we feel though this is not an appropriate rezoning request. Any questions for staff?
That adjacent property, Diane, the legal non-conforming, is that process going through now to make it where that,
No, they can stay legal non-conforming, and they just can't expand it, so they can't change the property. They were
Okay.
already there before zoning was applied, and therefore they can maintain that. They just cannot expand their footprint or their use.
okay, thank
If
you,
they were to leave, then they could not come back.
thanks.
You're welcome.
Diane, on the rezoning application, the applicant seemed like they referenced, I think this is 330, they referenced an address on Hands Mill Highway. I can't make out the numbers. But it seems like they referenced that address in basically in support of what they're trying to do. Is there any relation to that address?
No, I think they may have been referring to the Sheldon Brown down at the bottom of, may have been that one, where it could have been this property here where they have the welding business. That may have been what they would consider as being adjacent to influence
Okay.
this one. I don't have the actual address here on this map.
Looks like it does say Sheldon Brown.
I think they mentioned Sheldon Brown within their application. I remember seeing that,
Yes.
which is the property at the intersection of Liberty Hill and 274. It was denied in 2023.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Diane?
Diane, I didn't see when you pointed out the common ownership, which lot was that was,
Sure, I can come back to
Where the
here.
pool is.
Um,
Where it
where
goes
the
over.
pool is?
The owner where the pool is
Yeah.
and the welding business, they own, that's the same ownership, these
Okay.
two right here. So technically, it isn't even adjacent because there is a residential property between their property and the legal non-conforming.
Got it. And then further down below, it looks like there's a driveway access to
This goes to that.
the backside of the property.
Yeah. I'm not too sure who owns that further down. That's another property.
Does anybody else have a question? If not, is there a motion? I'll make a motion to deny.
I'll second.
All right, is there a discussion? I'm just reinforcing what Diane has said, is that
Right.
it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan. There are no like businesses in the area. It is not near the intersection of any major roads. And again, just reiterating what Diane said, the non-conforming, the legal non-conforming use to the north, I agree, it should not be used as a catalyst to promote further rezonings and down through this section of Hands Mill Highway. Does anybody else have anything they want to add?
No.
If not, all those in favor of the motion to deny the rezoning? No one's opposed. All right, next up is rezoning 24-17 to Clover School District. Is the applicant owner requesting to rezone a 15.67 acre parcel from RMX 20 to RSF 40. The subject parcel is located at 1771 Blue Eagle Way, Clover. The property is referenced as tax map number 382-00-00-065, Council District 2, Ms. Love.
This is a request to rezone a 15-acre parcel from RMX 20 to RSF 40. And the purpose here is to be able to rezone the subject property to have the same zoning district as the adjacent school parcel. Property is located on Highway 55, just to the east of town of Clover. As you can see here, the area is still, the school next to it is the Clover High School. Across the road there is a single neighborhood. Everything there in that light gray, that's the town of Clover. There is still some vacant property just to the east. And then the school owns a large lot to the, that property just south of there. Zooming into the property here, this is the actual part of the school business building that want to get rezoned. The intention here is to be able to eventually recombine here, and this would, different lots, different districts, crosses an issue between these two parcels right here. They're expanding this to be able to actually add a additional parking area for here. So rezoning makes it easier for that redevelopment of that site there. Property currently, the area here is RMX 20, but as you can see, the majority of the area here is RSF 40. Comprehensive plan in the area is rural residential, and as we know, that's areas where you have rural character with homes with an acre or more. The request, we're recommending approval. The request does not align with the future land use map designation. However, this is an existing school. It's not next to this school. The RSF 40 zoning district is actually a better, more appropriate, it's more suitable district than RMX 20, so it's an improvement towards that. And there are so many parcels in the area here already zoned RSF 40. So recommending approval. Any questions?
Like it says in the zoning, what's residential about it? Although I know that you can have other uses in there, right? So,
Sure, in RSF 40, yeah, actually there's fewer. So RMX 20, you'd be able to do duplexes, quadplexes, and some more higher density sort of things, but it's a built-out piece of property, so you really wouldn't do it anyway. But it's a more appropriate district next to
Okay.
rural residential.
yeah, just the residential component just kind of
Yeah.
throws you a little bit. Thanks.
Diane, are those three different lots combined, or is that just the way it was drawn?
Yeah, that's one lot. Yeah,
Okay.
that's just one parcel.
So as it is one parcel, would we need to combine it with the parcel next to it?
They'll come back in the future to do that. I think they've already done some work towards that. You won't see that again once it gets rezoned. This will be able to allow them just to recombine that all into the one. So, but like I said, you won't see that again.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? I'll just add that I'm more than happy to help clear up another property to make more
Legacy.
consistent rezoning, more consistent zoning in the area, so. Okay, all those in favor of the recommendation? Anyone opposed? No? Case number rezoning 24-18, Andrew Boshiers, applicant, Gold Hill One LLC owner, requesting to rezone two parcels totaling 2.19 acres from NC to GC. The subject parcels are located on Gold Hill Road, Fort Mill. The properties are referenced as tax map numbers 651-00-00-012 and 025, Council District 1, Mr. Abdel.
This is a request to rezone two parcels that total 2.19 acres from NC to GC. And the purpose here is to be able to construct a gas station with a convenience store. The properties are located at the intersection of Gold Hill Road and Pleasant Road, just to the west of I-77. Zooming into the area here, as you can see, this is a built-out area of the county with a lot of retail, commercial uses. There's other gas stations in the area. There's some light industrial, public grocery store, other kinds of businesses, medical offices, as well as a lot of residential properties here. Zooming into the parcel here, one property is vacant and heavily wooded. The other one does have two single-family homes, which I believe they're both vacant at the time. But as you can see across the road here, this is a gas station, and then over here is also a gas station. So you already have two in the area. Zoning for the area, the quadrant that goes from the Pleasant and Gold Hill to the west, the southwest quadrant, is still NC, but the rest of the area there is already zoned GC. comprehensive future land use map for the area calls this a neighborhood center node within that. And as we know, that's an area that's comprised of neighborhood serving businesses at major or near major or minor arterials and suburban areas, and they provide daily goods and services such as groceries, banking, and local dining options. We're recommending approval for the request. The map itself, that node itself, does not align with the comprehensive future land use map. Typically, you would see that GC or the community center with the two lined up together. However, 3 intersections already have, or corners already have GC. So you already have that presence there. You also already have 2 gas stations, and you have a lot of other commercial uses in the area. And so because of that, we feel as though the use of the zoning district align with what's already there right now. Any questions for staff?
Dan, I had a question on the traffic patterns. It looks like it's right in, right out on Gold Hill and both Pleasant Road. Is that correct?
So we're not approving the actual site plan right now.
Okay.
However, they did submit it with that right in, right out, probably knowing that's probably all they can get there. But
Okay.
we're not approving the site plan.
That's about all that can happen at that intersection.
Yeah, that's probably all they're gonna get at that intersection, so
Yeah.
they haven't right that.
So that, we'll see that site plan down the road.
You will not, no, that,
Oh,
that
no?
goes for staff only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just make a comment. I don't feel like I cannot vote for this, but on the other hand, I'm disappointed that another gas station would be coming in here. I think that the idea of the, neighborhood center, I would really, since I live in the neighborhood, like to see something more driven towards retail, dining, more of a destination as opposed to just another clear-cut gas station, which is a little frustrating to me. It's
And I can-
it's a beautiful piece of land.
Yeah.
It would be very nice if we could somehow save and/or maintain some of that green.
Yeah, we talked about this with staff and everything, as well as, because this is GC, or community center, you thought it'd be, Nancy might be better, more appropriate here. Had this been located further down Pleasant, we would not be supporting of that. That where we feel is where you'd see a lot more transition to that more of a smaller sort of a community neighborhood center. But being on the intersection here, close to the interstate, it made it more appropriate to allow that right there. But I can see it'd be nice to have something not gas stations, but.
Would be
Uh,
nice.
Yeah, because you've got 1, 2.
Yeah.
Kind of with
You
what
already have
Kate was saying, are they gonna limit clearing on that other parcel, that back parcel?
They'll clear it as they're allowed. So whatever they're allowed to clear, I'm sure that they would be clearing that.
Okay.
Given it's only just over 2 acres, it's difficult to be able to establish that without having to take out a fair amount of those
Yeah,
trees.
I mean, it'll be clear cut.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
because
just
based
the-
on it.
That's just the,
preliminary
it's the only
sketch.
way.
Yeah.
So again, I don't feel like I can probably not vote for it, but just as a member of the community of that particular area, it's disappointing.
I appreciate that.
Any other questions for Diane? If not, is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion to approve? Anyone opposed? And we move on. Rezoning 24-19, Susan Barnes Ellis, applicant, Louise Barron Barnes, and Susan Barnes Ellis, owners, requesting to rezone a 47.30 acre portion of a 67.39 acre parcel from RMX 20 to RSF 40. The subject parcel is located at 1881 and 1895 McLean Drive, Rock Hill. The property is referenced as tax map number 639-00-00-049, Council District 6, Mr. Huckabee.
This is a request to rezone a 47-acre portion of a 67-acre parcel from RMX 20 to RSF 40. And the purpose here is to be able to remove the parcel split zone status, which will allow for a future subdivision of the land. We don't know at this point how it plans to be subdivided. Property is located off of Mount Gallant Road, adjacent to Lake Wiley. It's a very heavily wooded property right here, but it's in an area where you have a lot of homes, whether it's a townhomes, single-family homes, some lake lots. Zooming into the property here, there are 2 existing houses on the property. There's a house up here, and then there's a house down here. I would imagine that the subdivision will include creating separate parcels for those 2, and at this point, that's all I'm aware of. The area to be zoned is the area there in hatched, and that's the area that's currently RMX 20, and they'd like to go to RSF 30. You'll see a lot of RSF 30 in the area there, 40. Comprehensive plan for the area here is single-family residential, and as we know, that's where you have single-family detached homes on large lots in suburban character. We're recommending approval. This request aligns with the future land use map. There are parcels in the area zoned RSF 40, and density allowed uses are some of those in the surrounding area. And this will also take away its existing split zone status. Any questions for staff?
If there's no other questions for Diane, is there a motion? I'll make a motion to recommend approval.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
Just wanted to make a real quick comment. I like when we have these that the minimum lot size goes up.
Yeah.
It increases, so
Sure.
that's always a good thing.
Is there any other discussion? Anybody else? All right, if not, all those in favor of the motion approve. All those against? And rezoning 24-20, John Hauser, applicant, John Hauser and Gwen Maynard, owners, requesting to rezone a 2.0 acre portion of a 30.6 acre parcel from GC to AGC. The parcel is located at 720 South Beersheba Road, Clover. The property is referenced as tax map number 191-00-00-005, District 1, or is it District 3, correct?
Yes,
Mr. Atkins.
thank you. The request to rezone a 2-acre portion of a 30-acre parcel from GC to AGC. And the purpose here is to be able to remove the parcel's commercial zoning designation to accurately reflect the parcel is currently being used. It used to be a vehicle repair business. They've been closed for a while, and they have to once go ahead and remove that GC district and put it back to AGC. Property is located off of Beersheba Road, south of Highway 5, in the western part of the county. This is a very rural part of the county. It's a very large lot, odd-shaped. Kind of zooming in here, you can see where that's the 2-acre portion right now where they want to get the property rezoned, the rest of the property. There is a home in this section over here. But zooming in just to the actual business itself, that was a vehicle repair business. Since this picture was taken, all those cars have been removed. So now it is just the building itself, which can be used as an accessory building to their agricultural uses. But he's taken some time. We've had these for a few months to get all those cars out of there, and they're all gone. Zoning for the area here, as you can see, it's mostly AGC. There is some RUD as well. Comprehensive land use plan here for is agricultural, which we know is farmlands and timberlands. We're recommending approval. The request aligns with the future land use map and the comp plan and removes the split zone status of the subject parcel. Any questions for staff?
Any questions? Does anybody have a recommendation?
I recommend
Make a
approval.
motion.
Yes, make a motion for approval.
I'll second.
All right, is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, all those in favor of the motion approve. Anyone opposed? Planning Commission to review and provide a recommendation to amend Chapter 155 of the zoning code, Section 155.937, temporary signs to modify standards related to the location, size, number, and permitting of temporary signs in each sign district, and to modify the permitted duration of stay for temporary signs.
Okay, I'm just going to give you all a brief overview of the sign ordinance. In terms of recode, this is probably one of the largest sections we actually did. And the purpose of that was to get it to what they call content neutral, which was a requirement from a Supreme Court case. And so therefore, we had to make a lot of amendments to that. The signs are grouped by 5 separate categories. I listed them here: AOS, RES, SSC, CI, and LW. And those each align with certain zoning districts in the ordinance. And so the code is looked at it in those groups. As I mentioned, all signs must be content neutral. And that was based on the Reed v. Town of Gilbert. And that made the statement that regulating signs against their content is unconstitutional. So when we look at a sign, we're just looking at how big it is, what's the size, the height, the duration of stay, where is it going, the setback. We are not, as staff, looking at what the words say. So it's all about the actual sign itself, how it's constructed, its materials. So what is a temporary sign? So taking that further, a temporary sign is a cloth, canvas, light fabric, cardboard, wood. As you can see, there's talking about the kinds of signs materials. It can either be a banner or a feather sign, inflatable devices. These are all types of temporary signs. The list does not limit the content of temporary signs, and like I said, we do not review the content of temporary signs. So within the code, temporary signs regulate permitting, so whether you have a permit or you don't have a permit, the number of signs, the location of the sign area, the sign height, and the duration. And that's how we look at for temporary signs. Here's some examples of what you might see for a temporary sign. You can see a sandwich board, an inflatable sign, these flag signs. These are all temporary signs. You can see the banner signs there, the post there announcing a yard sale. These are like just stake signs. All these are called just temporary signs. So for the overview of the amendment, the purpose here, or the results of this amendment, was to allow for additional temporary signage and for longer periods of display. So what we're doing here is the ordinance increases the number that are allowed and the length they can be out there for. It also prohibits temporary signs on commercial properties within the Lake Wiley Overlay District. So it just fully says you can't have those signs in the Lake Wiley Overlay and commercial properties. So we're going to kind of break it down to what you have in your package in terms of the different parts of the ordinance. So as you can see here, it says that the permits are not required for temporary sign. So that chart's been modified, no permits required for any of those districts. The change in the duration from 30 to 90 days. So now you can go from having from 30 days to 90 days consecutive days, twice a year. It also increased the actual numbers of signs that can go onto the lots. So, and that was changed to allow 2 additional signs that are 32 square feet, or up to 32 square feet on these properties that are in the AOC, REC, SSI, and CI. There is, in the Lake Wiley area, in the residential part of it, there is no maximum. So you can have 1 at 32, which is a 4x8 sign, and as many as you want at the 2x2 signs, or 4 square foot sign. So as I'm showing here, it's not allowed at all in the commercial one. It is allowed in the residential districts. What does that look like? So what we have here is a breakdown of those 5 different categories. Listed at the top there: AOS, RES, SSC, CI, and LW. Everything that you see circled are new things that you can do. So previously in the AOS, you could have 1 32 square foot sign, and you could have up to 5 of the 4 and below. Now you can have 3 of those. So you have 2 additional signs in that district. Same thing goes for SSC. You can have the 2, and CI as well. In the Lake Wiley, I've added there where you can only do this in the residential districts, and there's no max for the 4 square foot signs, and there's no permit required. So previously you had permits required for the SSC, CI, and LW, and those have been removed. So that's how the ordinance is changing. And we can kind of talk about that if you'd like. You have any questions about that? But that's what I think that's the last slide. Yep, that's the change for this code here.
I have one question right now. how would you differentiate a temporary versus permanent sign?
Well, it's how it's defined. So if you are one of those signs like this would be a temporary sign. If it's, temporary signs include banners, feather signs, inflatable devices. Those are all temporary signs. If you want to have a permanent sign, then you would do your permit and go through that way, that process. But these are all temporary signs.
I guess, I'm trying to think, I'm just concerned. I just don't want someone to consider what would be a temporary sign a permanent sign to try to, do you understand what I'm?
Yeah, but I think you look at how it's constructed. It's a very, non-lasting sort of sign. It's not going to last forever. And as opposed to a wall sign or a monument sign, those are defined signs. And so these ones are more temporary nature, construction, life of use is going to be. I'm not saying there aren't temporary signs out there right now that have been there for longer than what should be allowed, but there are temporary signs.
Okay.
Diane, how come we've got a little bit of inconsistency? Like in Lake Wiley, it's no more than 30 consecutive days, and then all other districts, it's 90.
Correct.
Is there a reason for that?
That was a request of council.
Okay.
Is that the same thing with the commercial?
Yes.
The other things too, I know this is maybe more of a comment, but really is a question too. Do they look at site triangles when they're putting these up? Because a lot of those inflatable, you just keep moving and you have to pull out, into traffic, you don't have a light or whatever.
Right. Well, there's no permit going to be required, and so they will just read the code and place them where they have read. Because they're not
But-
coming in for a permit, so we're not going to be able to tell them to confirm where it needs to go. They're just going to place them.
But shouldn't it be off the road
Yes.
a certain distance?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's why you'd see on this, here's the 10-foot, here's the road, and here's 10 feet, and they can do one through here in this section here,
Okay, I got you.
and then they can do the rest throughout the property. So there are requirements where it can go. So they're gonna have to, property owners will have to know where that happens to be and place it in the correct location.
Well, but it also depends on, if it's a straight road, I think 10 feet's fine, but if it's a curved road, and you got this thing,
It's a standard 10 feet off of the, off the right-of-way.
Aha.
Yes, there's right.
So who initiated this?
This is by council,
This was initiated by council,
yes.
and they've essentially already okayed, or they've had all these discussions?
We've had a workshop, and from that workshop, they defined how they wanted to make the amendments, what they wanted to see. And so once they tell us what they like to see, then we craft the ordinance.
Okay.
I'm starting to get really frustrated
Yeah.
with
Library.
Lake Wiley's want to be better or different or less congested than what the rest of the county is becoming, at least the area where I live. I don't want to see more signs up for longer. I think, why would Lake Wiley not have the same signs?
Well, I want to point out too that Lake Wiley, you cannot do any temporary signs in the commercial districts. So they're actually, in a sense, they're more restrictive than other parts of the county because they have removed the temporary signs.
No, I understand. I would love
Right.
to see that.
But,
I would love to see that go the other way. I mean, I would love to see that be what is implemented.
right,
Because my next question is, who enforces this? Because
Yeah.
there are temporary signs all over the place.
correct.
That-
Code enforcement?
There's no enforcement.
Yeah, code enforcement does, and we will occasionally do what they call a sign sweep. Where we'll go out there and just go and pull signs out of that are in the right-of-way and yank those.
Yes.
But in terms of anything that's in a violation, once again, without having a permit, we don't know when the actual sign is placed. And so if somebody was to call and say that there is a sign out there that's, it's been there too long. Well, the date starts when we get the phone call, and there's your 90 days. So that's when we'll start tracking it.
So really, it could be up there for 6 months before somebody
before somebody
complains.
complains, correct.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So what happened to the criteria? I mean, you put it in here, but if it goes past without, you know,
Right, but without having a permit, we can't establish a date.
This just looks like a recipe for a bunch of junk sitting out by the
Well,
road all the time.
And there's another point, I hate to bring up the overlay again, but what is the current regulation for signs 3 feet or 4 feet and under? Because it looks like that's being changed to being displayed indefinitely.
So the current one is, size is you can have 5 at 4 feet, well, at 16, sorry, 5 at 16 square feet is now 5 at infinity at 4. I think the numbers of days, look what the code said, but it is no more than 30 consecutive days, and I think that stayed the
Yeah, I'm not
same.
trying to trip you up. I thought the
Yeah.
current regulation was no more than 30 days twice a year.
I think that's what it is,
For
30
the
days twice
smaller
a year,
signs.
yes, that's correct.
And now
And now
that's
it's,
just being opened up to,
Indefinite.
yes,
you
correct,
stick it in the ground
correct, yes.
So that's,
until somebody runs it over.
that's
And-
only
and-
residential areas, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Nothing in the, and for everything else,
Correct.
it's essentially, then you're saying outside of Lake Wiley, 90 days, twice a year. So we're
Correct.
talking 6 months.
Yes.
What's
So-
the point of a temporary sign then? I mean, it's barely temporary. It's not temporary.
So I'd just like to remind everybody, just, we're reviewing and providing a recommendation, so what we're been given is the start of what we can,
Yeah,
so we
Consider.
can always add or modify or delete.
No,
as
I
we go.
understand. It's just, I'm a little confused by this one. It just seems
I understand,
Like
I just
it's-
want you to, it's
Right.
not an all or nothing, so.
fair. Fair.
that's why I brought up about the site triangle. Because I see these, because I've been around these temporary signs, and I couldn't see down the road. Yeah, especially the inflatable ones that move all the time, and it's a distraction. That's the only thing I'm really concerned about this, is the site distance. And I know somebody could complain about it, but I'm just saying the 10 feet could still be in your site triangle if the road was curved.
Right, and I think you might, if you wanted to add that as in your recommendation, to be able to either clarify, because I can go back and see what there was a section about. I
Yeah.
don't know that there is anything in temporary signs about site triangles, but I can confirm that to see whether it's not. And if that's something you'd like, we can make that recommendation and either can add it or say it's already there.
You know, maybe something to the effect that if it's tough to pull out with this temporary sign, it could be noted and shifted or something.
Well, I
You know.
think you would, with what you're saying though, is it cannot be located in this site.
Site triangle,
That's
okay.
simple as that. That's
Okay,
what they-
thank
you
you.
know.
It's-
Are you,
you can-
So clarify for me, for example, out in front of, I mean, I could give you an actual example, but say out in front of a new neighborhood, when they have, so many homes remaining. And we see those signs for years,
Mhm.
but that's a temporary sign.
I believe that's a subdivision sign. And that is at least what the old code may have been. I'll have to look at that and see what that is now.
Unless it's
But
been
but it's also,
Wouldn't the subdivision sign be more like the monument sign that's in front? that
no,
says-
there was those ones.
Think
that-
Anderson Chase.
oh, yeah.
Right, right. So
It's
they
still
would-
out there,
Yeah, it's how many lots that are still available, so.
Yeah, and the price
but they're
range
sold out,
change.
and it's still
But
out
I'd
there.
have to go back and see, once again, back to that content neutral, to see how that applies to that. That makes everything a little bit different, and I'd have to go back and see what that code requires for that, if we have subdivision signs anymore, and how that's written.
Or, for example, real estate signs.
Mhm.
I mean, they're temporary.
Right, and they can put temporary
So
signs
for
out there.
example, on the corner of
It's
Coltharp
just a
and
temporary
Pleasant.
sign. It's not a real estate sign, it's a temporary sign.
So real estate is fine, it can stay out there as long as needed, is what you're
If it's
saying.
a for sale, like in front of the person's house kind of thing.
Or like a bigger one in front of property,
Um,
you know, like a big plywood.
right, what are
Like
you
one of
talking about?
Is that a, yeah,
That would be
Yeah.
a temporary sign.
So like on the corner of Coltharp and Pleasant, that's been out there for 3+ years.
Yeah.
Is it a for sale sign?
Uh-huh.
Then that would be a, I think there is something different for that. I'll double check.
Okay. And again, not being argumentative,
Right,
I'm just
right,
thinking all these, you know, this just seems like we're opening up way more
Mhm.
clutter
Right.
in the right of way where we already have way too much traffic and, you know, problems with bicycles and pedestrians and everything else. It just seems like we're asking for trouble when we are putting so much more visual in front of our drivers. It doesn't seem smart to me.
Well, it's a traffic hazard if you hit it too.
yeah.
If
Well,
it's at a
yes.
certain height, you don't want to know what happens.
Well, I mean, hopefully 10 feet off, you know, nobody's going to hit it.
I'm talking about vertical.
Fair enough. But yes,
Yeah, and all these large signs, at least in the illustration, look like they're temporary, right? They're in place with what could be sacks of sand or weighted down. What happens if they actually put them in the ground with concrete? Does that become,
It does
You
not become
can't-
a permanent sign. Just because you put concrete there doesn't make it a permanent
Okay.
sign.
So if it's made
It
of
just
wood,
makes
it's
it so
still
it won't
considered
fall
a
over.
temporary sign. That's kind of my question. If
okay,
you-
yeah,
You
that's
put,
Yeah.
you put,
another way to ask
if
it.
you put that in concrete,
It doesn't make it a permanent sign. It just makes it
That's-
where it doesn't fall over.
it's just because the sign's still wood, it's still
It's
considered
still
a
a temporary sign. It's
Got it.
permanent, well, it's not even permanent, so therefore it's considered a temporary sign. It's that classification.
Something I'd like to add too, just because when you kind of, when you were talking, Kate,
Yep.
I started thinking, is we need to make sure these temporary signs meet DOT, you know, because if they're in the ground and you hit those things, you know, they're not breakaway, like what DOT requires.
Like a stop.
Especially if they're right.
Stop
Stop signs
and
up
traffic
high
signs.
enough where you wouldn't have the problem, and
But these
I
aren't,
don't
these aren't
want to
regulatory
say.
signs like that. That's
What's
a
that?
regulatory, that's a regulatory sign. A stop sign is a different sign.
Correct, correct.
So these are, I think you know, you've seen what a temporary sign is. You see it on the side of the road. These are actually in DOT's right of way, for the most case.
But if somebody hits it and it's in a certain height, it's coming through the windshield. It can.
It could.
So I'm just saying,
Yeah.
if you could put in the notes or whatever, that it needs to follow DOT height requirements. That, just to look into it, because it is a concern of
We
mine.
don't want to, the only thing about that is though you're applying a code of somebody else's code into your code, and you don't really want to, I think we define the heights and everything in our code, and I think that would be the appropriate way to go with it. I don't think we need to refer to DOT's.
Oh, I guess that's a straightforward question. Is there a height?
There is, it should be in the code.
Thank you.
I think it's 7 here.
4 feet?
5 feet, is that right?
That's
Yeah.
A-frame.
Sign height, 1 at 8 feet, 5 at 4 feet. So it should be in your package there on that
Where-
table, lot interior signs.
Okay, hold on.
And lot perimeter is 4.
Yeah, so the lot perimeter, it should be in your package there about what a number,
Oh.
sign area, and sign height. And then lot areas, lot interior signs, and so the perimeter signs are the ones here. These are the perimeter signs, and these are the interior signs. And so it does have a section there at 1 at 8 feet, 5 at 4 feet, and that's not changing from the current code.
So is that the max height, or?
That is the max height, yes.
Okay, so it's 4 feet.
Maximum, yes.
Okay.
I almost hate to ask this question, but how does one determine right of way? Because we constantly see signs that are right up against the road or between the sidewalk and the road itself in a grassy area. So I know you mentioned the distance from the right-of-way, but
Right. So
how does one determine where
the
that
right-of-way is determined by the plat. It's
Okay.
based upon the actual road.
Okay,
And so it could be for for instance, like a road that has ditches, it'd be 66 feet from the center of the road, so you're 33 feet on both sides.
Okay.
But if you have a larger road, it could be more, it could be with curb and gutter, you have a 50-foot right-of-way, so it all depends. And there'll be a plat that indicates where that right-of-way is. And so they would have to get it in that perimeter section, be outside of the right-of-way. Right-of-way ends, within that 10 feet is where you can have that. But it's difficult for you to be able to drive down the road and say, well, that's right-of-way and that's not. You
Right,
just have to,
that's
if it becomes an issue,
And
you can
that's-
find out.
And what she's saying, the right-of-way, that's not talking about how some properties still go to the center line of the road. It doesn't include that. It's that-
understand. Yeah, it's where you start measuring from,
yeah.
that it's your private property.
Does anybody else have any questions?
No, I still have a concern about the vertical, though. I mean, I know it's 4 feet max, but the liability of that.
Once again, we're
I
not
mean,
changing that.
I grew up on
That's-
DOT, so I know everything about it.
Yeah, this code
Yeah.
does not amend the height at all, so that would be something different what the code's actually addressing.
Okay.
What happens in instances of violation of this?
So for a temporary sign violation, if somebody was to call and complain and say, this sign's been out there for, it's too in the wrong location, it's been there for too long, if it's in the wrong location, our code enforcement officer will go out there and have a look at it and tell, just move your sign back.
Okay.
And then if it's been there for too long, we would then notify the property owner, we've had a complaint that you have a sign, temporary sign on your property, and so you have from today to 90 days, and then it must be gone. But we can't go back and say it's been there because we don't know how long that's been. So the violation, the clock starts ticking if we were to receive a complaint.
What if the complainant could prove how long the sign had been there?
I don't know. That's something I can't. speak to that.
Timestamp picture.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I don't,
It's a code enforcement.
I'm sure we have a policy for that, we would refer to whatever that happens to be.
If there's no other questions, does anybody else have anything else to say? If not, is there a motion someone would like to make?
I'll make a motion that, I understand it was initiated by council, and I appreciate that, but I would want to see a limit of essentially what's been asked here to 2 large signs, 6 small signs, and 45 days, not only throughout the county, but also in the overlay.
I think that's fair.
I mean, I feel like it should be applied
Consistent.
consistently.
Right, well, that's what, yeah. That's what I brought up.
I will add, though, that, remember, the overlay looks at 2 different ways. It's the commercial versus residential. So in this case here, the other districts, obviously the AOS and RES are obviously residential districts, so they already have their differences built into them. So I think if what you're saying is that in the Lake Wiley overlay, you cannot have temporary signs, are you saying you want to expand that to all commercial districts throughout the county, that you can't have it in the commercial districts, as well as they have it in Lake Wiley?
No, I would like to see an across-the-board enforcement of the same requirement. So if we need to allow large signs in the other parts of the county, which there seems to be reason to say that we do because the other council members didn't ask for that to be taken out, I'm assuming in the same way that Lake Wiley's representative did, then I think it should be applied across the board. If they come back and say, if the argument is that Lake Wiley absolutely can't have them on commercial lands, then I don't think the rest of the county should either.
So you're saying make it more consistent,
Absolutely.
yes or no, either way,
And I would absolutely vote for less.
less?
It's just, it's overwhelming, especially with just how much is out there, and it does not get enforced, and it doesn't get taken down. And if we're just adding to it, that seems problematic.
I would agree, and then if you look at other sign districts can have any size sign, but the Lake Wiley overlay can only have the large signs for a particular period of time, and the 4-foot square, which seem to kind of reproduce on their own. It has to be consistent. So I would piggyback on what Kate said, and would also recommend that we're consistent with the type and size of signs that we're talking about.
I just want to, you had said 2 large signs, and I just want to have the number.
Yeah,
right.
no, I was just trying to find what I felt like was some middle ground. So I said 2 large signs, 6 small, and 45 days, twice a year.
45 days, okay. And a consistency across York County as a
Mhm.
whole.
Yes.
All right, so that's your motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion, any further discussion?
Just for,
And the site triangle is gonna be in that too, right?
yes, we
Okay.
can add that.
Can-
We can confirm the site triangle and see what that, if it has anything already in there, we're fine. If not, we can add something.
Okay.
You can add it to the
That's what I,
recommendation if you want.
Yes,
yeah,
it
they
would be
wrote it down. They
Would be a
wrote it down.
condition, I guess.
All right. And confirming site triangles.
Sure, unless it doesn't need to be added as a condition.
No, I just think that would be something that, like I said, that we would confirm to see what it is, and then if it's already somewhere else, then we're fine. If it's already covered, then we're fine. If not, we'll add that to that, is what you're saying.
All right, we have a motion.
Hold on, can I just want to make sure we're clear before we go to the next step?
Yes,
So 45 days,
yes.
twice a year, 2 times, or twice?
Twice, yeah,
Yep.
2 non-consecutive?
Non-consecutive. And then 2 large signs, so it went from being 1, council was 3, you're saying 2. Okay?
Yep.
The side triangle part. I want to come back to the part about being consistent. And that's saying that it needs to be the same for that across the board, but you prefer to have the lesser of the fewer
Yes.
signs as possible. So it means having to reduce the county to match the Lake Wiley.
Yes.
Yes.
That's what you'd prefer. Okay. Thank you.
My apologies, I didn't catch anybody second this?
I
John.
did.
You did?
Antonio?
Thank you. Okay,
Yeah,
That's me.
Antonio, second.
Yeah.
Is there any other discussion?
Yeah, definitely in agreement with Kate. It should be consistency across the board on this one.
Okay. All right, with the motion and a second, all those in favor, making the recommendation? All those opposed? Lastly, Planning Commission to review and provide recommendation to amend Chapter 155 of the zoning code to modify separation requirements for certain uses in the Lake Wiley zoning overlay.
All righty. Let's just go ahead and bring us up to date here. As you can remember, back on March the 11th, you voted to defer this request, and that was to be able to receive additional information. And there was four requests of staff to provide. That was maps to kind of see how this is going to affect the area. Are there any applicable TIAs in the area to be able to refer to or give any kind of additional information? The RFAT's Highway 49 corridor study, you'd asked for any kind of studies going on in the area to kind of give some more information as well. And also to consider this as a special exception. And so we'll go over all those individually, but I want to, before I get started, just to kind of remind you that why we're here and what this process is. This came from public comment during the small area plan that we did back in 2020. And from that, there was a public comment saying there's an oversaturation of these uses. And so that created a policy recommendation within the plan to be able to consider any kind of ways to minimize that, to reduce the concentration. then from that, we designed a zoning code or a text amendment to be able to have that use separation. So that's the steps that we're at. So we're focusing on here, what are the tools that we can do to be able to separate the uses that were identified in the small area plan process. Going through these, there was a memo in your package, kind of overviewing of all these issues. We did review the TIAs. We only found one in the area, and that was in the 5 Points area. But also to remind you that the purpose of this is the use separation, and to reduce the concentration. So the TIA is not measured by a traffic study. So a traffic study is not going to result in how do you minimize the concentration of uses. And so the information is there, however, it really isn't applicable to what we're doing for this item here. The next question was the special exception process. For those who aren't familiar with that, that's heard by the Board of Zoning Appeals. And what they do is a chance to be able to consider if it is individual use is appropriate at a certain location. And so it might be allowed in that district, but maybe not at that individual space. And so what they do is they look at how is this going to affect the surrounding properties? Is it in the public's interest? Is it in the county's interest? Also, this does not address to reduce the concentration. This just says, is it appropriate to be at this location? So once again, that also wasn't a very good tool to be able to prevent any kind of overconcentration. The fourth thing on your list there was that corridor study, and I thank you, Matt, for forwarding that on to the commissioners to be able to review. It's a 49-page document just talking about the 49 corridor between 274 and Buster Boy Bridge. They talked about capacity, any kinds of TIAs, trash data. Also very good information, but probably really isn't really pertain to this separation requirement, but good information about the area. That leads me to the last one, and that was the maps. And so as you saw in your package, I created maps for you all to kind of get an idea as to how is this going to affect, how is this separation going to affect the current development, what can go there, where things cannot go. So just kind of giving you an overview of this very, very busy map here. And I broke it down into 4 separate areas to kind of be able to hone in on these areas here. The first one in the blue shaded areas, that's the current separation. And so in this case, because one negates all, I could then dissolve it into one large layer that anything within that blue area, you can, if you already have one there, you can't do another one. That's a 660 feet. The properties that are hatched. So what those are parcels throughout this area here that are currently zoned GC, which is where these uses can be allowed. And they're either going to be vacant or what I consider to be is underdeveloped. So there could be a house on that piece of property. In reality, that probably is ripe for redevelopment, and therefore it would be on play for one of these kind of uses. So that's why you see some properties there that are not fully vacant, but anything in the hatch are already zoned GC. The rings around that, those are the distance of 1,000 feet from the actual building footprint. So now we've honed down to, instead of just being by the parcel line, I'm looking at individual building footprints. And that gives you an idea as to what 1,000 feet would be like. So you can go from the 660, and now you're at 1,000 feet. The rings themselves, now at the amendment, we're looking about one negates one. So it's the same use. So a car wash negates a car wash, and that's why you see the different colors. So you might see an orange ring, and that aligns with a restaurant with a drive-through. Within that orange ring, you cannot do another one of those uses, but if the other uses are within that ring, you can do those uses. So that's kind of how this map sort of plays out. Once again, this is going from Oak Ridge Road to 274, just that one stretch right there. I have all 4 maps here. Some are easier to understand than others. If you have any questions generally, we can stop now and I can take those. I can move through, or however you would like to go over this information.
If nobody has any objections, I'll just say you want to work through each map.
Sure. If you have any, I mean,
And
like I
if-
said,
And if anybody has
but-
questions at the end of that, feel free to ask.
So I can just, this was the section here that went from Oak Ridge, that goes to 274. The next one here, which is where you see a lot of the uses, that's why there are so many rings. This goes from 274 to about Bonham Roadish. And and then it goes to the next one here, that goes from, where that dropped off to Buster Boyd Bridge, and that's the main 49 corridor. And then going down this way, we're looking at 274. And so this is the section around 5 Points, which is where you already have property zone GC, and there are some properties here. Now, I'm not gonna say, there are a couple of small properties that are GC that are kind of scattered throughout, but there's nothing going on around them, so they really wouldn't be in play. Those are the 4 maps. Those are the 4 areas. I'm welcome to answer any questions you have. John, you asked for some data for that as well. The overlay, just in general, is about 25,000 acres. That covers the entire overlay. And so from that, there are 47 parcels I've identified as being either vacant or underdeveloped. So there's 47 of those. Of those 47, the smallest one is 0.36 of an acre. The biggest one is 45 acres. And the total acres is 302. So of all those areas that have been shown here that are hatched, there's 302 acres and 47 separate parcels. And I do have, if you're curious, the slides we presented at the last meeting. They're also in our PowerPoint. If you need to go back and revisit something, if you had questions about that, I have access to those as well. And just one quick clarification here, that from this evening, because we're at our 30-day period, that we have to get a recommendation. If you do not give a recommendation this evening, your motion goes forward to approve as written. Just kind of let you know, process-wise.
Just want to remind everybody, I had forwarded today 2 documents I had received from the Lake Wiley Chamber of Commerce. If you do not have a copy of it, I have a copy here for you to review. And that'll be entered in the minutes.
Yes.
So Matt, they have essentially asked us to delay or defer again, which we cannot do.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
So,
Correct. We cannot defer our decision any further. We can,
so while we can appreciate that they have done that and also submitted as council,
Right.
if we defer, we're essentially
It's automatic.
sending it up. So,
we can make a recommendation, though, to consider a corridor plan, which I'll state for the record, I'm in favor of.
Yeah.
And I would like to, when we get to that point, I think that's, I have a number of reasons for that, and I just,
Me too.
I'll discuss it a little bit later with, is there anything, anybody else? Is there any other questions for Diane?
Yeah, I got a question. You mentioned that the special exception process does not address the purpose to reduce oversaturation of car washes, fast food restaurants, but didn't mention that it wouldn't be a solution for basically the future going forward for new development that falls under the system. Did I hear that correctly?
So what we're saying is that this separation requirement is a better tool to actually use a distance as opposed to going to a body to review it. This is how you typically, if you want to reduce concentration, then this is the tool that better solves that issue. Going to a BZA for them to be able to make that same determination, this is a more efficient way to do it.
And what's being proposed tonight, how would this have an effect on existing businesses that basically need to expand in order to stay in business?
Right, so if we can kind of go back to a month ago, that was also one of the benefits of this ordinance, is that it does say it's only for new businesses. And so any existing businesses that are there right now, they're grandfathered in.
Yeah.
So if they want to be able to expand their footprint, they can do that. This will allow them to do that.
Yeah, I asked that specific question. I'm
Yeah,
pleased with the
on
answer. So
their
Yeah,
if
property,
you,
correct?
an existing
On their
On
business,
property, yeah.
yeah, an existing
Yeah.
business
Should be
on their
able to.
property can
Right.
expand
Yeah, I do.
any of those uses
Yeah.
without restriction.
Yeah,
um,
I asked that question
Other
just
than
for,
other zoning criteria.
yeah, I asked that question just for those who are basically watching,
Yeah,
um,
understood.
online.
Matt, would you, this no separation is required of the, and I'm reading on back of page 116, where most of the changes are. What you just said, Matt, no separation is required if proposed use is on the same lot or a lot adjacent to a use listed.
So
And
I
I,
can,
and I believe,
So-
I believe the intent of that, and Diane, I'll let
I
her,
remember that.
it's talking about new uses in that list.
so, you're talking about the adjacency part. So I
Yeah.
brought up, once again, I told you I had the slides from the previous one,
Yeah.
and that's what this slide actually does. So if you already had these two uses here, if you had a McDonald's and a Zaxby's and you want to put a Taco Bell there, you can do that as long as you get that cross-access easement from your properties next to you. So that's the adjacency part, that you could do that. That's that section. I'm going to go back to
Okay,
that one there. This part here on that same lot.
okay.
So this is part of that text amendment right there. And there's the, Antonia's talking about the new use is highlighted there, so you can see that.
Kind of going up a little bit there, when establishing a new land use. So talk to me about that, because I don't know if we discussed that last time.
So that's what we've been talking about here.
Okay,
So the purpose of that text, that word, new land use, that it says if you are already there, this code does not apply to you. So if you have an existing car wash and you want to be able to redevelop your site, you are not hemmed in by your current footprint because you are an established use. So a new use, and so if you want to come into as a new car wash, that's when this applies. So that's what it means by new use. It's a new business.
okay.
Dan, first, thank you for putting these maps together. It looks
Yeah.
like there was quite a bit of
Yeah,
work involved in researching and then applying the two buffer requirements on here. But I'll go back to a basic question that I have, and that is, we are proposing, or it has been proposed, that the regulation or the ordinance change from any other land use to the same land use. And how does that help us not have an overabundance of what residents have said they don't want?
If it was taken in itself, by itself, at the same to same, without adding that 1,000 feet, I think that it's kind of a balance. So it can go same to same is now the only thing being permitted, but now you must go an extra 360 feet. So now you have to, around your property. So it's sort of a trade-off. And like, I can go back to that, you know.
I remember the example.
Yeah, that. So you might get a little bit more, but you might get it in a location where it would be okay. You might get a car wash next to a gas station or a gas station next to a fast food, and that would be, it's limiting but not fully restricting, is what this does.
The use types listed here on the map
Mhm.
are just the ones that were problematic for the public, right?
Those are the ones identified by the
But
public.
it's not a comprehensive list of the businesses that could be in GC that are,
That's correct. These are
Correct.
the only ones that are being allowed, that are being restricted. There are a plethora of other uses that have no restrictions whatsoever in GC.
okay, I think that helps, because my concern is looking at this, you know, all these hatched areas, and these are, you know, property owners. And so I do have concerns, you know, about that and the way this kind of hems them in as well for the property that they already own,
Correct. Yeah, so they can't do those 5, but they can do,
other
lot.
things.
yeah, correct.
She asked my question, basically.
so I'm gonna put my TIA hat on. You know, says in the first paragraph, last sentence, this study found the existing AM and peak hour operating at level of service D, which I think you know, Diane, that's not very good level of service through here.
D's an allowed,
What's that?
D's acceptable, we accept a D.
Really
Just
not,
saying,
but,
yeah.
yeah, that's debatable. But we're already capacity. I mean, that says it right there. To change that level of service, you'd have to either change your lighting pattern so you don't have so much queue along a main road, or you widen the facility. That's the only way that level of service is gonna go up.
That is a true statement. However, the focus this evening is about use separation, not about, I mean,
I
there are so
understand.
many, it really doesn't apply to this. That TIA is not applicable whatsoever to a use separation, because there are a lot more intensive uses that could happen here that are, it's not a car wash or a gas station or a drive-through. So that is just, I understand what you're saying, that level of service is an issue in general, but to this topic here, it is not part of the discussion. As TIA does not apply to a use separation, a concentration of uses.
I understand that.
That's what I'm just saying. I
Sure.
just make sure that we know that does not really apply to a concentration of uses. That applies to if you want to do a corridor study, two separate things.
It's kind of what we're talking about anyways, right?
Mhm.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to
Yeah,
ask?
I have another comment regarding the separation requirement. If you look at the maps, there isn't a significant difference. And I'm looking at one at a time. I'm trying to find an example of where the 1,000-foot would make it any more difficult to have an establishment of a similar business. And I think, going back to the land use, if the argument is that the 1,000 feet is a trade-off, I don't see it as a trade-off. There's no example here of a trade-off.
Well, I
And
think,
what we were trying to do is not create a situation where you had car wash, gas station, restaurant with a drive-in, and then further down the road, the same number of options of land uses. So I might argue that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I might argue that the 1,000-foot separation really doesn't get us anything that we don't already have with the 660.
I would say though, just using this example here,
Okay.
that it does show that, that this would just allow a drive-through restaurant and only that. So right now, let me go through, none of these can go on there with the 660.
Right.
Going to 1,000, you're still only gonna get one. So there's 1,000 feet right there. So it's difficult to be able to look at the map and say exactly what you can do. As you can tell by this, there's just no way to do
Yeah,
that.
without measuring, sure, but
Yeah, and I think it's just a kind of, I think in the corridors where you have, if I go back to the really spaghetti one here, that one there, that's where you're gonna have your most limitations. Because they already have the existing uses that are there right now. Here you might be able to get something through here, but you may not be
here
able to.
you've
I really
already,
couldn't.
you've already filled in.
You already filled in.
Basically-
I think the opportunities for growth and for new development is gonna go on this section over here.
Yep.
And if you're looking at possibly something over here. And this is a GC property, lots of acreage right here, that maybe at some point this could be redeveloped. And maybe you could have an out parcel for a restaurant. You couldn't do a storage thing, but you know what? Maybe you could put a gas station or something over here. That might be appropriate. Once again, it's limit the concentration, but not limit the use in its entirety. It's that balance.
Sir,
I make a motion for executive session.
yeah, feel free.
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session to discuss some of the options that we have here in front of us
And receive legal counsel.
and receive legal counsel, yes.
Okay, So there's a motion to go in executive session to discuss options with, and receive legal counsel. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor of going in executive session? All right, no. So we will go into executive session. Returning from executive session, no action was taken. And so now we're going to continue questions with Diane about the recommendations of the ordinance. So just want to clarify again, we had talked about this during the last month. Since Recode, we've had one proposed and one permitted site.
No, since Recode, we have had nothing permitted,
Nothing,
one submitted for a sketch plan, and one discussed,
one discussed, okay,
and that's it.
okay. So in the last 2+ years now, there's been no additional sites developed with those uses. So just something to take into consideration. Was there anything else you were going to add, Diane?
No,
Okay.
but if you have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions still.
So if there's no more additional questions, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion here tonight. I'm going to break this up. I'll read them all out, but we'll vote on them individually. That way, everybody's not committed to an all or nothing. My first recommendation is I would separate the uses out. It's in the following groups: vehicle service, car wash and gas station, drive-through, and self-storage. Those would be 4 independent.
Oh, so it's not to the same as to the individual
Correct. So it would be vehicle service and vehicle
vehicle
service,
services.
car wash, gas station combined.
Okay. So that's
Each one would stand alone. My second recommendation is to develop a corridor plan. The purpose of the corridor plan would be to encourage minimizing curb cuts, encouraging and recommending and adding cross-access across multiple lots, including a component for separation to prevent oversaturation or overconcentration of some of these uses we've discussed. I would even add we can include architectural standards if needed. And the study would cover 4 specific areas: the Buster Boyd Bridge to the intersection of 274 and 49. The second would be 557, which is from 274 and 49 out to Highway 55 intersection. I would also have the 274 49 intersection down to 5 points. And then lastly, I would have from 5 points down to, I believe it's called Cannonball Run now?
That's correct.
Correct, which is former Daimler
Yeah.
Boulevard. So that would be 4 corridors that would be, the study would look at. And they can be broken out, so each one kind of stands on its own, and they may have slightly, hopefully, slightly modified differences between them. My third recommendation is in the corridor plan, have a component that encourages internal circulation amongst different commercial sites. Again, we're talking about the cross-access easement. And lastly, which would be number 4, is I would maintain the current distance of 660 feet right now. So those are 4 things I'm recommending as a part of my motion. So we can, the last one was maintaining the current distance of 660 feet.
But that's only for new, is that for
That,
new?
and correct, it would, the 660 feet would be for
New uses.
new uses as described here, correct, right here in the ordinance, right now. So when establishing one of these new land uses.
So on this screen right here, on number 2, I think everything you're okay with the exception of the 1,000 feet, you're saying it's the 660.
Yes,
Okay. I want to go back. I'm only seeing 3 specific things here. One is the like uses, then the corridor study, and then the 660. Where did I'm missing something. Did you expand upon the corridor study in your number 3?
yeah, I did. I talked about a number of things in there.
Okay, so it's pretty much all about the corridor study in number 2 to 3?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Matt, if I may, your third point was encouraging internal circulation
Across multiple sites, yeah.
across multiple sites. That does not mean circulation through residential areas or connectivity, does it?
No, I would, that would not, my intent of that is not to
Okay.
have circulation through commercial, or through residential neighborhoods. It would be circulation through multiple commercial sites,
Okay,
whether it's by cross-access easement or new road construction, however that can be developed.
It seems like you covered that a bit in the number 2,
Yeah, I
access
did.
management. So I feel as though that number 3 is somewhat of a repeat of
Yeah,
of
you're
the
right.
access management. It's
No,
been
you-
giving it more specific components to it. So I think the general corridor study would include all of these things.
Yeah, so basically there's 3 things then. It would be separating the uses, the corridor study, and maintaining 660. Good. So that is my recommendation. I'll read it again to anybody if you want to hear it. If not, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Is there a discussion? Is there anything anybody would like to ask or?
Point of clarification, so you're seconding all 3 things in one motion? You presented as being all 3 things within one motion?
Are we going,
I
We'll
was,
go
I
one at a
would
time.
propose those as 3 different motions, just
Okay,
so
so-
we can, if the group does, I don't want the group to feel like they're committed to all 3 if they don't need to be. I'd rather have each one individually.
In that case, let's do each one as a separate
Okay,
motion.
so the
Yes.
first,
okay.
all right, so then my first motion is to have the uses separated out into the following categories: vehicle service, car wash, gas station, drive-through restaurants, and self-storage. So those would stand alone when discussing the separation from those like uses. So a vehicle
Combined?
service, a vehicle service does not knock out a drive-through.
So
And
it's
a
the same.
self-storage does not knock out,
It's
does
same
not
to
knock
same,
out a
1 to
car
1.
wash. So it would be self-storage to self-storage, car wash, gas station to car wash, gas station, drive-through to drive-through, and vehicle service to vehicle service. Each one would stand alone when you're talking about the separation of, and my reasoning for it is I don't really feel that,
Can we get a second on that motion there before you go to
Yes.
your reason behind it, if you'd like? Are you seconding that one then?
I was gonna
We
let
have-
him,
we haven't made, he hasn't made the motion.
yeah, he
was
hasn't.
just
So-
discussing.
well, that's the, okay,
That's
so,
the
I'm
first
sorry.
motion. That is
So
the
that's
first
the motion.
motion.
So the motion is the separating of the uses.
Yeah, I'm still in agreement with that.
Okay, so there's a second, so we can discuss
Second, yeah.
now that part of it. Again, I wanna go back and say that I feel like the issue it's not necessarily any one specific use. I think individually, I think they all can stand alone by themselves. I don't think I don't see what some people would consider an over-concentration of any one single use in there. And personally, I feel, in terms of the uses, I feel like they're all very much, they're very different uses that have very different traffic patterns with it. I don't feel self-storage is a traffic-generating use. I don't feel like vehicle service is a large generating traffic use, especially, and it's a whole nother issue, but I feel like that could even be broken down further, because you have the oil change places, and then you have the true, body shops and engine
right.
repair where vehicles are there longer, and you don't, and I think those have even less intense traffic use than, like an oil change place. So I feel like separating them out, I think each one should stand on its own merits that way versus as a group.
Mhm.
So that's my explanation for
Okay.
that. So I'll leave it at that. If anybody else has anything to say, I'm more than happy to hear.
Yeah,
So we got-
I go back to the original intention of the ordinance, which was to reduce the total number of those specific uses by making them all combined into one, not one use, but one
Category.
category, okay? So I feel like if we change that, we're changing the original intent of the overlay. And I didn't see any examples where it was any different. I agree with you on the 660, but I didn't see that many examples, if any, in the maps that showed areas where we might not have additional overlap if we didn't do the combined, looking at them in an aggregate as opposed to individually. And I might go one step further. We haven't discussed this, and I know you addressed it the last time, but I would say that boat and RV storage should be included in the self-storage, because that's also something that's grown along the corridor. And I'm not sure that it's that different than other self-storage, other than what you're storing is bigger, and it either has wheels or a trailer. Is that a definition that?
Yes.
That
It's a separate use.
it's a separate
Separate
use?
use in the
Correct.
code, yes.
Is that something we can add, or?
You can make a recommendation to
We
the
can
council
make a
consider adding
recommendation
that to
to
the list
add
of
that?
separation uses.
I'm gonna leave my motion as it is. If you wanna make that as a motion for yourself later, I think that'll,
Okay.
so we have a motion and a second on separating out the uses. So all those in favor of that? Anyone opposed? Okay, so that is turned down. Does somebody have another motion they would like to make regarding this, the separation of the uses?
So since that failed, what you could do is be the alternative, and that would be to say to leave it as written. Motion would be to leave it as written in this amendment here, to keep them as,
Leave it as written originally?
no,
or-
as the amendment is showing here, because that's
As
what
the
the amendment
proposed
shows
amendment.
here. Well, no, I'm sorry, that's originally, I'm sorry, you're correct, as originally, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
And this is just the uses, right?
Yes, this
Yes.
is just the
Correct.
uses.
Yeah.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve, I guess, the existing requirement as a recommendation to council, which means the uses that Matt has described, but the locations would have to be against an existing establishment of any other land use in that list. Is that basically what we would
Right, so you're
summarize?
saying that one cancels out all of them, as it is currently
Okay.
written.
That would be my motion.
Okay, so that's your motion. Is there a second for John's
Second.
motion? We have a second. Is there a discussion? All right, if there's no discussion, then all those in favor of John's motion, raise your hand. All those opposed? And so the motion passes. Okay. The second motion I would like to make is to recommend council develop a corridor plan, and the purpose would be to minimize curb cuts, increase internal circulation and cross-access across multiple commercial lots, revisit the separation requirement to prevent overconcentration of certain uses. And then I would also say that the study should cover 4 areas, which is the Buster Boyd Bridge to the intersection of 274 and 49, on 557 from the intersection of 274 and 49 out to Highway 55.
Can we go back on that geography there?
Yeah,
So you're saying from, on 557, from the old 3 points
Yep.
to where it intersects with 55?
Yeah.
Like way almost to
In
Clover?
yeah.
Do we not want to take it to Oak Ridge?
Just to, and the purpose is that it also reflects, I'm trying to have it to include that because of those areas, even though there isn't commercial zoning out there now, that the tendency would be growth would be along that corridor. And I'm not recommending any specific property be rezoned at that, but just,
Right. So just for clarification, so here's 3 points right here.
Yes.
So you want to go this way down 557 all the way to where it gets to 55?
correct.
Gotcha. Just want to make sure I have the geography correct.
Yes, I understand.
Thank you.
The third leg would be from the 274-49 intersection down to 5 points. And the fourth leg would be from 5 points down to Cannonball Run. And that would take place over, however, what that timeline would be, guessing roughly a year.
Yeah.
It would involve public meetings, bring together all the stakeholders, commercial properties and residents in the area. I think it would provide a much more solid plan moving forward for everybody if we can address all of these issues, which, can also include architectural standards. So that's my motion.
Matt,
Yes.
would you consider 55 in that as well, going west?
From 55 to from the 5 points intersection out to
I don't know.
the
if you-
intersection of 557. We could. I don't foresee commercial zoning going out that corridor anytime soon, but that's not.
Yeah, I want to say that I think that is kind of creeping too far out, because once you get out too far, then you're really mixing types of development and patterns and everything, and I agree. 55 is the 2 lanes, will be 2 lanes for a long time. Now, right here, I think we can expand it, maybe
Yeah, maybe take
to
it
like
out.
the Pelicans kind of thing. Just go a little further down where there's some current stuff, maybe to
That's fine.
Summer Lake or something like that, to that, as opposed to being
Yeah,
just on the 55, go a little bit on the sides of it as well.
So Highway 55 can be its own leg there from the intersection of 5
5
points.
points.
To the end of the commercial development. 'Cause that's
Yeah.
where it turns to, like I said, Summer Lake
Yeah.
It's
Uh,
right there, or Summer House.
Approximately where Imagine Church is,
Yeah, yeah.
so that's just, and for everybody's reference, it's
It's just-
just off the edge of that map
Yeah,
there.
the church is
So-
probably about here somewhere, so yeah, it's about to there.
And I think after that point, that is
Certainly
really
changed. Then the park property,
exclusively residential.
large lot,
Yeah.
rural.
Okay.
I don't think anything from, on the eastern side either, you're gonna get more towards the
No, that's,
peninsulas and all
fine.
those.
That's actually Lake Wylie Road, but that's, I just thought if you're going all the way to 55 on 557, you might want to consider 557 where it's going to come down from 3 to 2 lanes, at least.
Well, it will take, I think on 557, I think there's some unique things. I think at that intersection there.
Kingsbury, and it gets to that Kingsbury
Yeah.
and Bethel School. And,
Yeah, there, and, you know, the Pennies project's coming through, so that's going to encourage
Yeah.
growth westward from,
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to study it. I'm just,
I think if there was a significant change in what's coming along 55 there, I think I would,
no problem.
so, that's, my motion is the corridor plan. Again, is there a second, do we have?
I'll second that.
So we'll have a second. Is there any further discussion about that?
Actually, can I ask a couple of questions?
Yes.
Just to clarify. So, I'm again sort of stuck on the fact, how differently we've been treating Lake Wylie. And so, I wonder why this above and beyond what all our ordinances in terms of connectivity and curb cuts and access, what does this get us past what is already written in and was just updated
I-
that we did for 3 years?
I think part of the concern, and I'm just speaking from my position and my opinion, is there's been kind of a hodgepodge of development in terms of commercial, and there's never been any one document or any one plan that's unified all of it. And if there can be something on the table that talks about that, and that's not something that has to, you know, has a definitive time period. That's something as sites are developed or redeveloped, they can incorporate those points into that. So, I think just because to the second part of your question, why is it just Lake Wylie? I think it's just because of that area, the growth that it's received, the corridors that we're talking about are all very different. I think the 49 corridor is very different than what the area down around 5 Points is. So while I think they both should have some type of plan moving forward, their goals may be a little different than, so it's not gonna be one.
But you don't feel like the small area plans and the overlay that we already have is sufficient?
So the small area plan talks about a corridor plan in there.
It doesn't
Amongst
get-
like it does, like
it
it
doesn't
also
get
talks
exist.
about the overconcentration of uses and all that. So I'm really just trying to promote one of the points that's in the small area plan and not necessarily pulling something out saying, I think we should do this for Lake Wylie. This is something that they already said, we should do this here. And, and we haven't really moved forward with that. So I just want to just make that as a recommendation. And that's all this is it's a recommendation. So
And then, there's another question in there too, although I think that you did address it with it being already in the small area plan. I'll come back to it if I need to. Okay.
Diane,
Mhm.
do we know how much a corridor study costs the taxpayers?
I really couldn't say, to be honest with you, how much it's gonna cost the taxpayers. I don't know that this is something that the staff has the capability or the bandwidth right now to do it internally. So it would have to be something we'd have to budget for it, and it would, whatever that would fall in that process. The RFAS one for the 49 quarter, that was paid for by RFAS. I don't believe that they would do the same thing for this. You know, it's $60,000 to $100,000.
Okay, thank you.
Really?
Are there any other questions or discussion points, anybody? We have a motion and a second. So all those in favor of recommending a corridor plan be developed, say aye, or raise your hand. All those opposed? Okay. That passes. And my third recommendation is to maintain the current distance of 660 feet for new uses. That's,
Yeah, I second that.
okay, so we have a motion and a second. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say? Any other questions?
Yeah, I just think it's important to, you know, go keep the separation requirement in place as it is. That's just for new uses and not affecting existing businesses that prevent them from expanding their business for growth or to remain in business.
I think
I want
the
a
new
clarification on that
distance
one.
would not change that. So whether it was
Right.
660 or 1,000, if you had an existing business with one of those uses, you're absolutely allowed to expand as long as you're still on that same property. That was something, again, I just said, I asked this last month because that was very, very important for me, for the existing businesses to know that regardless of whatever the distance is, they're still able to expand as they need to.
That brings up an interesting point. You may want to have a additional motion, and that is to be able to recommend approval for the other things, not talking about the separation of the one-to-one, 1,000. And that would be the issue talking about the new land use, the definition change. These are minor, and then as well as the cross-access easement part. I think those are still part of the ordinance for the amendment that are not part of what your motions have been so far.
Okay.
So I know they need to consider those as well, just for clarification purposes. Once we get a vote on this one here, we still haven't got a vote, I don't believe, on the 660.
Yeah, so that,
You made the motion, he seconded.
yeah, that made a
Yeah.
motion and second.
Yeah.
So all those in favor of maintaining 660 separation, raise your hand. Okay, anyone opposed? All right. I guess my fourth recommendation would be including the staff language that talks about no separation is required if the proposed use is on the same lot or an adjacent lot to a use listed in 155, 198B1 with a cross-access easement.
That would allow then, now thinking about it at this point, that would allow a restaurant next to a restaurant if
Yes.
they're,
With,
the
under,
cross-access
with the
easement.
cross-access, it has to have a cross-access easement.
Is that a motion?
Like your example.
That, yeah, that's
Like
my
the
motion.
example.
yes.
That's your motion?
Yeah, that's the,
All right.
that one is the motion.
All right, I'll second.
All right, is there any discussion or questions for Diane?
Could you repeat that?
Sure.
Could you repeat the motion?
So, my motion is that if one of these new land uses comes in and they're adjacent to another land, one of these existing land uses, the separation requirement is not applicable if they have a cross-access easement between each lot.
Between
that's
properties
off
that
of
are
the road.
adjacent?
Yeah.
Not, okay.
So if, like in the example she had with the Zaxby's and the McDonald's, if they were connected via cross-access easement, then it would be permitted.
So then does that stipulate no additional curb cuts to the main road? Because we haven't said anything about curb cuts, so would that take away, that additional,
It doesn't prevent that the way it's written right now, to be able to establish a new curb cut. It would simply say that if there is an existing curb cut, they would, so it wouldn't say that you couldn't put a new curb cut there.
but that's kind of the idea, right?
That's one of the intentions, correct.
So could that be a recommendation?
You could,
We can make that as.
If it's a like
but no.
business,
Mhm.
whether it be new or established, although I guess we can't really take out a curb cut from an
Correct.
established restaurant. So if it was a new like business, it would essentially use the
The what?
existing entrance? I don't know the
I
best way
think
to.
that's, I'm gonna ask if we can do that motion separately. I would just like to get,
No, I actually meant to do that separately. I'm just
Okay.
wondering
Right.
if that's, but is that the intent?
Sure. One of
That
the
is the
intents
intent?
is to be able to reduce the number of curb cuts. And by having them get that easement to the property next door, that means they wouldn't need a curb cut.
Right,
That's correct.
okay.
But there may be a location where, on a corner lot, that you might be
Right, so I mean,
appropriate to have it.
where
So that's why
feasible
it would
or-
be difficult to be able to say that you could never do that, because there might be an opportunity where you weren't appropriate to have a curb cut. Separation requirements for established curb, there could be reasons why maybe this new one is a better one, so it's hard to say you couldn't have a curb cut.
But maybe something like it needs to be looked at, or it needs to follow,
To minimize the,
okay.
additional curb cuts possibly.
okay, so, we have a motion and a second on, the issue about separation not being required for proposed use on the same lot or an adjacent lot to a use with a cross-access easement. Is there anything else? Otherwise, all those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? All right.
So then I would like to make a motion that if an existing, well, I guess if two of the same uses do end up next to each other, that the curb cut be, what's a good, I mean, I don't want to outlaw it, but I want it to be considered. I want it to be, that, sorry.
So if there's cross-access, no curb
Encourage-
cut.
Cross access, you could go through
Encourage.
each driveway.
So you want to encourage and promote
The u-
minimal curb cuts
For new like
for new like uses?
uses.
Or do you want to require minimal curb cuts, which would be multiple properties cannot have multiple curb cuts?
Well, as Diane
Like
said,
as an
there may
example.
be a situation, I don't want to limit to the point where it doesn't make sense, but I would just like there to be some common sense applied to.
So what I would recommend is to kind of go back to our second motion, and that was to do a corridor study.
Mhm.
And in that, Matt referenced a number of things to be able to address in that. And that might be the more appropriate time to do that, to then, from that corridor study, may then produce ordinance amendments that we need to consider we may already have a lot of these things in the code that addresses that.
Right.
So perhaps we should let that lie for now, and then in the corridor study, if it sees that we need to identify locations where it might be more appropriate to have curb cuts or not have curb cuts, that would be the time to be able to address that, as opposed to just putting in a code that may not be the best use.
Yeah, I'd be happy to put that on hold. I mean,
I did put that in as part of
okay.
part of the corridor plan, so I
It
did
is in
say
that
we're
corridor
gonna,
study.
one of the things we need to look at is minimizing number of
Curb
curb
cuts.
cuts.
Yeah, I think it's better to study it first and then make quick codes.
I think that's good.
That's a major component of that, so. Does anybody else have a motion?
Would this be the appropriate time to make a motion to add RV and boat storage to applicable land uses?
Yeah, if you,
So I would like to make a motion to add the RV and boat storage to the applicable land uses as part of to go along with self-storage facilities.
so that would be a
So you want to have F.
Be an added
Fifth.
use.
sixth.
An added use. mean, if we're considering aesthetics, most of the new storage units that are going in, whether it be U-Haul or the one down on 5 and Adna Church, they're trying to integrate them into the architecture of the area. Some of them even look like apartments. I don't know how you disguise boats and
Yeah.
RVs, and
Yeah.
those take up as much space, if not
Farms and
more.
landscaping.
Yes.
Well, I know, but it's still,
So that'll be a separate use by itself, basically.
It is a separate
It
use
is a
already
separate
in the
use.
zoning code, so.
but it's
we-
not included in this. It's not included in the overlay.
So this would be adding a sixth a sixth use to be separated from each other.
Diane, it was,
I'm sorry.
in the
Mr.
original A,
Mr. Chair,
boat and
did-
marine,
Mr. Chair, did we
It
have
was-
did we have a second on that motion?
We do not.
Correct. So we have a motion from John to add RV and boat storage to the list of land uses under B1 in the code. Is there a second?
a second.
So we have a second. All right, so now we can have discussion. So the code, what you're referring to,
Right.
it talks
In
about
A.
boat and marine and ATV service repair and customization facilities. That doesn't actually say anything about storage. So
Okay.
that's why this would be
Additional.
an additional land use.
Okay. Gotcha.
And the official terminology of that one is motor vehicle, recreational vehicle, and boat storage. So that's the actual use. It's
Yeah.
those three things. That's
That's
the use you want to add to it.
When you got people storing trailers, you got.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion?
And that would be a one-to-one on those, not compared to self-storage, correct? Is that what you're saying? Or you want it compared with self-storage?
Well, the motion, the first motion I made, which,
Was the-
and
all
the
together.
one that passed was all of these are together. So if this gets added into that, it's added in all together with all of these. So you couldn't have an RV and boat storage near a restaurant with a drive-through.
Okay.
Does anybody have anything else? If not, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. All those opposed? So 3-3,
3-3,
the motion does not pass.
3 Aubrey, Matt, Antonio.
Antonio, myself, and Aubrey.
Was it 3-3? It was
Yes.
4 was Tom, John, Kate.
The 3 that voted for it, yeah, was Tom, John, and Kate.
Yep.
All right, so since the motion is not passed, we can either just move on, or if somebody has another motion they would like to have a different motion.
Yes, because otherwise I believe you made a motion to move forward with it as it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
On this point, they
Yeah.
earlier made a motion
Yes,
essentially
right.
to adopt that language.
yes.
That
Yeah.
amendment failed, so you can
Exactly.
move on unless
Reverts
someone
back to that,
wants to change it.
yes.
It's fine.
Okay, so that would be it. So we have there's 4 items it's in this recommendation. I guess that would conclude that item. Is there anything else that we need to cover in there?
So we leave it up to council to determine what happens with the corridor study.
Correct. Everything here tonight is being sent to council
As a recommendation.
as a recommendation, and so they can accept it, reject it, or have some hybrid modification of it. So it'll ultimately be up to them.
Yep.
So, next item is the rezoning
What?
tracking.
Tracking sheet.
The what?
I did not.
No, I don't have another one. I just, one question about that. I know we had talked in the past about timeline to, for an item that's in a rezoning? Is there anything coming forward about when that timeline expires?
For you to review? Is that what you're asking? Is there anything coming, by coming forward, what do you mean by coming forward?
Well,
So,
I understand some may be before it gets to us, but sometimes some of these are on hold with council.
right, it really depends upon where it is in the process. So right now, we have, I think we're down to just one that's on hold, that's just coming up to a 6-month time. And it's a code enforcement case, and we're gonna have to contact them and say, it's just going too long, you're gonna have to withdraw. And that's what we'll do. But that's more of a policy than it is anything with the code.
Okay, so that's, so, I'm sorry, so that is a policy thing. I do remember you saying that, I
Yeah,
apologize.
it's a policy.
All right, so, with that, I believe that's all. Is there, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all those in favor? We are adjourned.